We're in.
Okay, does it tell you that it's
Yeah,
connected?
it said we're live streaming, so I think we're good to go.
Okay.
Amazing.
All right. Oh, done. Awesome. Okay. Let's go. Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome. Um, this morning, Miranda Wimbush has joined us for
Everybody.
this live stream. Hi. And if I know some of you have already watched her interview that is airing today in the summit. And we already have some comments about people being really moved and inspired by this whole idea of getting connected to your dog. So if you're listening live and you have questions, go ahead and put them in the comments and we'll get to them. And I'm sure Miranda will be delighted to answer them. And while we're waiting to see what the questions are, Miranda, give us, kind of a little bit of a background about why it's so important, why the whole concept of being mindful and connected, and being sensitive to your dog's feelings and your own feelings, why that is so important. And it just kind of overrides any kind of formal training that we want to do. We've got to get to this piece first. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I find is that, and I know this is certainly part of my journey, is I spent a lot of time looking outside myself for answers. And I know when I was struggling with my dogs, it was often, okay, what have I not done? Like, what book have I not read? What course have I not done? Like, what am I missing here? And there was a lot of projection and judgment of myself, judgment of, okay, why is my dog like this? Or why am I like this? There's a lot of conflict and stress. And what I realized is that it's really all comes down to my own relationship and connection with myself. That's where like everything starts and begins. And when I started to work on and kind of heal my judgments and my relationship myself, take a lot of time connecting inwards, kind of looking inwards, going, okay, why am I so triggered by my dog's behavior, or why do I judge myself so harshly about and feel like I've got to get everything right, and I've got to constantly be learning and constantly be and not absorbing. I really realized that was kind of the missing link. And I really feel like this is so important now as we become more aware of the emotional world of our animals, how important it is to then learn about our own emotions as well, and what that reflects back in us, because in order to develop that ability to be empathic and sensitive to their needs, you can't just put your own needs on the back burner. If I see people burn out when they're just like, everything gets poured into their dog, they're just focusing on, how can I meet your needs? What am I not doing? Everything's just, and it's just like this frustration and resentment is building up because they're pushing away their own needs in the relationship. And it's kind of it's a little bit backwards. It's looking at it from the other lens, but then everything just works. I was having this conversation with someone the other day. Really interesting was, just talking about the importance of, and it's not saying that your dog's needs don't matter. Absolutely, they do. But when you do prioritize and go, okay, what's important to me? What do I need in this moment? How can I support myself in feeling balanced? It just flows better. And I've not just found this in my relationship with my dogs. It's like in all my relationships. I have a high needs son as well. I have, I run a business. I've got a lot on the go. And it's like, whenever I put my own needs on the back burner and not focused on that, everything just falls, the day will start to unravel. So I think that, I don't know, I feel like that's a long answer to the question, but I really feel like that missing link is working on our relationship with ourselves, looking inwards, taking time to be present and create deep connection within ourselves, which then has this beautiful positive ripple effect into all our relationships and into really all the aspects of our life.
Yeah. Such good advice, Miranda. And maybe, I'm wondering if maybe you can give the folks a practical example. Like,
Mhm.
for example, I'm in the middle of trying to finish a project and maybe the dogs start barking or the dogs want this or something else. And I'm starting to feel that resistance, that resentment, that anger building up, like, come on, can't you just wait till I finish this?
Right.
I think, we've all been there.
Mhm.
What can a person do practically in that moment
Mhm.
to calm things down a little bit? Because that
Mhm.
kind of anger it's not gonna help me, and it's certainly not gonna help my dogs.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah.
something that we can actually do in that moment.
Yeah, yeah. So it's absolutely important to have strategies for in the moment, but what's also important is just watching how you're doing throughout your day and being mindful of what your capacity is in any given day. Recognizing, and this is where the kind of the kind of compassion comes in, is that if you're pressed and you have a lot on the go and you're on a deadline or something like that, recognizing your capacity to be present and patient and kind is going to be reduced, right? And so if it does come up that you get frustrated or angry, um, it's knowing that, okay, I'm human, like this, I just had a moment. um, Acknowledging that, okay, I'm like, oh, I'm frustrated in this moment, actually does a really good job of reducing it. So like you were saying, it's easy to go into and I see people do this a lot, into resistance of, oh, they immediately start to like get down on themselves because they had a moment of frustration. No, it's normal if you're concentrating and your dogs are barking or there's creating chaos. It's normal to have a moment of like, oh, it's frustrated. The important thing is to think of, okay, and this does take awareness, and this is part of incorporating mindfulness into your day,
Mhm.
is having mindful awareness. Okay, this is what's coming up for me now. This is how it is in this moment. If you can have that presence of mind to go, I'm frustrated in this moment, this is how it is right now, that kind of reduces the effect of like feeling like, oh my gosh, this is terrible and this is always going to be this way, which our brain likes to do. Like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, the whole day is ruined because I had this moment or I felt this uncomfortable emotion. Um,
Mhm.
and then if you can work with yourself, you may need in that moment, set a boundary and say with your dog, like, I'm finishing something, I'll be with you in a few minutes, not right now. If you've already acknowledged I'm a bit frustrated, um, and you're able to just respond, you can respond to their needs in that way. It doesn't mean that to be a good dog parent, you've got to drop everything you're doing and completely go and shift. You may not be able to in every moment. You
Yeah.
can acknowledge that need for sure. But ultimately taking a moment to ask yourself what you need in that moment to get back to a space of feeling balanced. And for me, that is often acknowledging the emotion, taking a moment to just, feel my feet on the ground, take a deep breath, and recognize that it's just a moment in time. Our emotional reactions are actually only like a couple of, like, it's like 15 to 30 seconds where we actually feel that, "Oh, I'm frustrated." And if we can just be with it, acknowledge it, allow it, it'll pass quite quickly. It's when we say, I'm not frustrated, I don't want to be that way, I'm shutting that down, I'm shoving it in, I'm creating all this, then it persists and persists and persists. And I've seen people, it go on for days and days and just bubble and create this huge negative ripple effect.
Yeah, it reminds me of that familiar phrase, what you resist persists.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
that's such good advice about acknowledging the feeling, to just say,
Mm-hmm.
yes, this is how I feel right now. And that's good to know. I didn't know that 15 to 30 seconds
Yeah, don't
would
quote me
pass.
exactly on that. I'd have to but it's
Good.
really short. Like, it's a lot shorter
Yeah.
than you think.
Yeah.
If you're like that, you're in a feeling, if you acknowledge it and if you if you register that, right? Like, I know
Right.
this morning I was going out for my walk and I was thinking, like, we can get into because we have this lovely prefrontal cortex, you can get into the future time, right? And I was
Mhm.
tipping into thinking of all the stuff I've got coming up, tipping into a bit of like anxious, okay, I've got so many things to do. Um, and it's for me, I do this little bit of an attitude adjustment of just, okay, what's the thought? What's that thought? And what's that feeling that those thoughts are generating? What is the replacement feeling that I want to feel, right? Like, and it's not denying the feeling, it's actually acknowledging, okay, right now I'm feeling anxious, not making myself wrong for being anxious, going,
Mhm.
okay, how do I want to feel?
Mhm.
Calm ideally. If calm is something that's like, okay, I can't even contemplate that, even neutral. I just want to feel neutral towards this right now.
Mhm.
And then taking some deep breaths. We did in the interview, just kind of breathing into your heart space. Feeling kind of allows you to get back into the present, into your body, into your experience right now, and just allow that. You know,
Mhm.
and you can do it while you're walking your dog, with your eyes completely open. It doesn't need to be a sitting down meditative moment. It's
Mhm.
just asking yourself. We have so much control about how we want to feel,
Mhm.
that we don't always realize. And I talk a lot about energy and importance of being balanced and in a positive energy state.
Mhm.
And the biggest thing, like, that influences our energy is our emotions, and allowing our emotions to kind of just continue in a negative cycle, or not recognizing, okay, I have a lot of control about how I want to or choose to feel. And a lot of that is also, with mindfulness, being aware of what thoughts are generating, because thoughts generate kind of patterns, which generate emotions. And we can get stuck in just like our dogs can, like, in a kind of pattern of, this is the comfortable track of where I'm used to feeling. I'm used to feeling kind of anxious or
Yeah.
or frustrated, and actually be feeling different than that can be uncomfortable a little bit because it's so
Mhm.
unfamiliar. So that's something that's important to note as well. It might be a little bit uncomfortable to shift and start to be in a little bit more positive, uplifted state.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that whole concept of choice is really important, that we do
Mhm.
have the ability to choose um, how we want to feel. And, just that whole process of acknowledging it, allowing it, accepting it, and then making a choice about what you want to do next. It kind of
Mhm.
gives it, when we feel empowered, that in itself is a very calming feeling, that I
Absolutely.
have control over how I
Mhm.
feel. And as you just mentioned, it's the same with our dogs,
Mhm.
that we can help our dogs do what you're just describing for us. For humans, we can help our dogs. We can acknowledge their feelings and
Mhm.
support them, allow the feelings, and then teach them how to choose a different path.
Mhm.
And like you
Absolutely.
said, the new path is going to feel a little uncomfortable at first
Mhm.
because it's new. But the more you practice it, the easier it
Mhm.
gets. Oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
really great advice. One of the things that I find helps me is if I'm working, and this week, obviously, I'm spending a lot of time at the computer.
Yeah.
And it gets, you get a little brain fog after a while. But if the dogs come over and say, it's time to go out, and I'm like
Mhm.
busy typing away,
Yeah.
it's time to go out. I find that I can choose to get frustrated and say, not now,
Mhm.
I'm busy, or I can say, stop, take a breath and say, okay, let's let's go out. This is probably a good thing. You're probably coming over and giving me
Right.
some supportive advice and telling me that, hey mom, it's time to go out and take a break because you're getting a little
Mhm.
tense. So yeah, and I'll
Yeah.
take that, and what I usually do is, because I'm lucky to have a lot of properties, so I take them out and we just go for an off-leash walk.
Mhm.
and that, they wander around, they sniff, they do their thing. I get to take a nice walk in the fresh air and look at the baby bluebirds that are in the little bluebird.
Oh, cute.
I know, it's so adorable. And sit back and hope that mama comes and feeds them. And so all of that like getting in touch with nature, walking in the fresh air, being
Mhm.
aware of the nest of baby bluebirds, and just watching the dogs enjoying their walk and their sniff and their running hither and yon, and just relaxing and enjoying themselves. That makes me feel really refreshed.
Mhm.
So sometimes, back to what you said a minute ago, when you allow acknowledge the feeling and allow it, it can take you to a nice, calm place.
Mhm.
Once you get
Yeah,
past so let me just
absolutely.
look. Let me look on the Facebook and see if I
Yeah,
don't
for
see
sure.
any comments or
Yeah.
questions. So let's just keep going with this. I love this conversation that we're having. So what can we do to transfer this feeling of calmness? What I just
Mhm.
described, kind of going with it, just an example that came to mind for me as you were talking, and I think anybody listening might be able to think of, oh yeah, think of examples where maybe they did go with it and it had a good outcome, or maybe they resisted it and now they're thinking, maybe if I had done a little differently that time, it may have turned out better. So maybe the next time you can try
Mhm.
something different.
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
so how about helping our dogs with this transfer? Let's say the dog is in a state of tension, anxiety, overreacting to things. How can we
Mhm.
take that whole concept of acknowledging and allowing and
Mhm.
going for a better choice? How can we work that through with
Yeah. Yeah,
dogs?
absolutely. I love that question. And I think definitely sometimes it's looking at, you know, I think it's important to get quiet within ourselves, and because that's where we'll know what's really going to be supportive,
Hmm.
right? Um, and I think a lot of us have more of an intuitive knowledge of what's going to benefit our dogs than we give ourselves credit for. And
Hmm.
I see this a lot, as well as like looking outside ourselves for the answers, versus if you actually take a moment to pause and ask yourself, what do I need in this moment? Okay, all right, I'm just arriving in this moment. Okay, and look, and then you'll be so clear and so connected to what your dog might need in that moment, right?
Hmm.
And oftentimes I find it's the same thing. And so when they're feeling anxious, or it's easy for us to pick up that, because we're so deeply connected to our dogs, that when they're feeling off, it's easy for us to just meet them there. Okay,
Hmm.
you're anxious. Okay, what do I got to do? What are all the things like I've got to do to make you better? And I've seen this in myself so much with my dogs and with my son, because there's a residual uncomfortability with them having a moment where they're not okay.
Yeah.
And really, I think what they need us to be there for them is to be like, okay, I see you, I hear you, you're struggling. I'll give you an example. Like, I was out on a walk the other day, and I don't usually do street walks with Wooly. Um, but I was, and we were just walking down the street, and he is pretty, he would have been a reactive dog probably if he hadn't landed in my home. But we do a lot of decompression, and I don't put him in situations where he's, confronted with a lot of chance to kind of work up, because he gets worked up quickly.
Hmm.
But we just happened to an off leash dog. We were walking down the street, and off leash dog just came running over to him, and um, it was fine. They did a little brief greeting. The other dog was kind of pivoting and getting a little bit, looking a little reactive. So I was like, go, go. And he went back to his house. The owner, of course, apologized. And we walked down the street, and I could see Willie he was just like looking, he was getting hyper vigilant and going, okay, whoa, that was out of the blue. That was out of nowhere. I just got that was a lot. I just paused. I got down low with him. I just put my hand on his chest. I kind of rubbed his chest. I took a moment to just calm, because it was acknowledging, oof, that was a lot. Like, that was a lot, buddy. That was a lot for me, because I've, had negative experiences with dogs flying out and it being not good, right? Or turning into a dog fight. So I needed that moment, and he needed that moment. I didn't keep going. And I think this is what a lot of times we can be like, okay, let's just push through. I was like, no, if I keep going on this walk right now, there's more chance that he's just going to take all that stress and transfer it onto the next thing. Let's take a moment. I rubbed his chest, kind of grounding, my kind of attach my body to him. And as I can like regulate and feel, okay, I'm feeling a little more normal, I could start to see his body language relax. Years go back, not looking around so much. So that's where that kind of saying is like, oftentimes what we need is just to meet them there, right where they're at in that moment, acknowledge, hey, that was tough, meet ourselves in that moment, go, wow, that was a lot. And oftentimes that is enough. It's not about doing so many different things. Definitely there's training techniques and there's things, that'll be supportive, but sometimes less is more. It's more about just meeting them there in that moment, acknowledging them, asking ourselves, okay, what do I need to be okay? And I think this is an important part. The more we look at meeting our dogs emotionally where they're at, and we look at like how they do regulate their emotional state as we regulate our emotional state, it's that awareness that we've got to be tuned into how things are impacting us as well as how they're impacting them, and not just meeting them in the stress and trying to fix it.
Yeah. And encounters like that when you're out leash walking your dog, and leash reactivity seems to be a really common issue with a lot of people. And it like you said, we're human, and if something unexpected happens, we're going to get a little anxious about it. But I think your advice is so powerful, because if you can first manage your own feelings, and like you said before, acknowledge them, say, oh, I'm feeling that was a lot, I'm feeling stressed, and then support your dog through it, because if you're feeling it, certainly your dog is feeling it, and maybe your dog is feeling it even more intensely than you are, depending on how he processes his environment. And if he and that is another good point you made, was that instead of just pushing through and continuing on the walk and taking the chance that the dog is now going to generalize, now around every corner, behind every tree, there's going to be some dog coming up to attack him, it's okay, let's just take a break. And the thought that I think a lot of people have about doing that is, oh, we're just giving up, we're not we're not facing it. But that's not it. That is making a wise decision based on the reality of the moment.
Absolutely.
And doing what is in your dog's best interest.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I get that sentiment as well. Like when I first brought Willie home, he was completely overwhelmed, and everything was just, like we experienced, like just like us, we can sometimes be like, oh my gosh, everything is coming at me. Dogs can be the exact same way. And I remember one of the first days I had him, I was like, okay, we'll just take a little walk to the end of the block. In my mind, no big deal. I could see that like halfway down the block, he was completely overloaded, like just sensory overload. His hackles were up, his tail was high, his ears were high. He was just like hyper vigilant. And I was like, okay, done. We're going right back home. We're going to do some sniffing in the backyard. We're going to, I'm going to find some quiet spaces. And it would have been easy for me to go, oh, that was a failure. I can't even walk him halfway down the block. I was like, no, that's not working for him. And I could feel my anxiety picking up going, oh my gosh, do I have a reactive dog? Right? Because I've worked and lived with reactive dogs, and I was like, oh my goodness, right? But rather than going down that rabbit hole, it's just like, I think the more that we can be present, and this is the more the mindfulness comes in, and it being a practice of non-judgmental awareness of what is in the present moment, the more that we can meet our dogs where they're at, the more we can meet ourselves where they're at. The less we get stuck in story and judgment and making it means so much more than it does. I know I did that a lot. It's like I made my dog's behavior mean something about me, or who I was, and I took it very personal versus this is their journey, this is their experience, and my role is just to support them, meet them where they're at, meet myself where I'm at. And I think it's easy as well. It was kind of popped in my head when you were talking before. My example of that dog, off-leash dog running out. If I had gotten stuck in that judgment or criticism, say of the other dog owner or the situation, or why did that happen? Why did he have his dog off leash? He shouldn't have. Like, if I would have not have been able to meet myself and say, wow, that was hard, or Willie in that moment, because I would have been completely in my own head about in frustration and anger and resentment. And it's not a space where progress or can be made.
Yeah. Judgment, that is, I'm so glad that you're emphasizing that, because judgment takes us away from the goal that we're striving for. If our goal is helping our dogs become calmer, as you just said, if you start getting judgy about, the other owner or the dog, or, sometimes even judging your own dog, like, why do you have to react that way? It really takes us away from the goal. It doesn't serve us in terms of bringing us closer to the objective, which is to help our dog see the environment as a safe place. And if the dog isn't feeling safe, there is nothing else that you can do in the moment to teach him to feel safe. You have to bring him to a location where he feels safe. So home, going in your backyard and letting him sniff, or getting a distance away from whatever is making him afraid. So yeah, that, it's a whole different way of understanding ways to help our reactive dogs. What we used to do is ask them to process things with their thinking brain, when their survival brain, their emotional survival brain, was controlling everything, and that thinking brain was shut down for the moment because the dog didn't need it. The dog was thinking fight or flight, survival. That thing is scary. I've got to run away from it. And we used to say to the dogs, do this, do this, do this. Look at me, sit, watch me, wait, and all of that. And it just never worked. And now we really understand why it never worked, and what we can do instead that really, really helps the dogs. So this is
yeah, absolutely. And I think that is an important piece, because absolutely having choice is a really, really, really important thing that boosts resiliency and creates possibility. However, there are some moments where we get to say, you can't make a rational choice because you're in your survival brain, right? And I think that this is something that is really important, is improving our own resiliency to stress, because stress is not what happens to us. Stress is our brain's reaction, just like our dogs. How quickly does your brain go offline when something unexpected happens? How quickly, and then how quickly do you recover after something stressful happens? That is a skill. That is something that you can build and improve with something like mindfulness and awareness and different relaxation techniques, and learning to build that. Because I see a lot, and I see people say a lot, well, I do know strategies, but everything just flies out of my brain as soon as a situation comes at me, because I'm just freaking out. So I think that's the important piece there, is that it's really valuable for us to spend time working on our own resiliency to stress and our own, our ability to respond versus react, because then we're going to be able to meet them there and say, okay, is this a moment where you can make your own choice? And I can allow you to process a little bit the environment. You're not completely tipping into overwhelm, and we'll give you a minute, like to process and see if you're going to make a choice. Or is this a moment that I get to step in and say, okay, you're struggling, or in a moment you're really going to be struggling, and let's choose a different path. But yeah, that's a piece that's important as well. And I find there's a lot of focus on what the dog needs, or what skills do I need to build up, or those things. And I get that, it's good to have that ability to do stuff. But if we can't access it because we're so overwhelmed, that it doesn't really support us in the end, right?
Right. Yeah, right. And so resiliency, would you just kind of explain what that looks like for us, and then maybe what it looks like for the dog? How do we know if we're being resilient in a moment, and how can we help our dogs do the same thing? Because that's the key, isn't it? I mean, we can't control things that happen, startle us or scare us or upset us. I mean, those things are going to happen. But the key is the recovery and the resilience. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I mean, resilience in dogs or in people is the ability to prepare for, recover from, and adapt in a stressful situation. So it's all three of those elements. Like, how do we prepare ourselves in each day so that as much as possible we're regulated? And this is something that I had to learn a lot about, because I didn't really realize what that meant. I kind of lived in a state of my I adjusted to the state of kind of being anxious and kind of being just tense. And you can feel it in your body. Like, if you're feeling your muscles, just like our dogs, you can see their tension. And that translates into pain. A lot of times we know it's important to look at our dog's pain. You could see that same thing in yourself. If you're carrying stress and tension in your body, you'll feel it. You'll feel physically tense and tight. And that's how you know you're carrying your stress, excuse me, rather than processing, emotions and letting things flow and move through you. So resiliency is a really important skill to build, and a lot of it is about recognizing what things support you and maintaining like an equilibrium throughout your day, because there will be things that spike and come into your awareness, just like there is for our dogs. And so it's finding things that you put into your day deliberately to ground yourself. And so I use breathing techniques, I use qigong, I use walks out in nature, just like you were saying. A lot of different tools, and I think it's important for each of us to find those set of tools that help us feel calm and balanced. Some of it is awareness too, of looking at how do I respond to situations that are a little upsetting. Some of it's just really subtle, like carrying things like resentment or judgment, or things that drain our energy stores, or just and being aware, does that actually support me? What would be something different if I could let go of that and choose something different? Being in like a negative emotional state drains our resiliency, drains our ability to respond, because if you're like low, you're feeling and frustrated, or and just like tired, and it'll literally, when I say drain your energy, it'll make you feel tired, exhausted.
Yeah.
And then if something happens, your ability to respond and your ability is going to be so much drastically reduced. So I know, like, we talk a lot about building resiliency in dogs and giving them a lot of choice and giving them a lot of things to help them decompress and de-stress. And it's super vital to do that for them. And a lot of times I find, like, you can combine those two things together. Think about what are those non-negotiable things in my day that support me in feeling calm and balanced, and support my dogs. And sometimes that might be separate from your dog. For a lot of times with our dogs, the things that build resiliency are, I find, giving them choice, giving them opportunity to do their natural behavior, and finding what brings them joy, and that's going to be, it's going to be distinct to each animal. Like, rather than focusing on what you think you should be doing, like, 2 walks around the neighborhood every day. What makes them silly and have fun, and what like makes you laugh, what brings you joy, that that they're really having a good time, because I think it's possible to create that synergistically as well. But sometimes you may need moments to yourself, and what I find is most of the time, if I give myself those times, I'm like, then I am more able to meet myself, and then meet my dog. An example of that is in the beginning, when I first got Willie, I used to do workouts, and he could not process or be in the same space as me when I did my workout. Now, I knew that my workout was important to me for my own ability to process stress and show up and everything. So I set a boundary. Okay, you've got to stay outside of the bedroom when I work out. And just doing that, he was like, okay. And now he can be in the same space as me, and he does, just chill on his bed while I'm doing it. But that's the piece of knowing what's important for you to build up that resiliency to stress, knowing what's important for your dog. And sometimes that might join up, and sometimes it might not. Sometimes it might be separate activities.
Yeah. And it's okay to do something that doesn't include your dog to help you restore your own energy. And that, that drained feeling that you talked about that makes you so tired, that's not a good kind of tired. There's a good kind of tired where, maybe you've been doing something really productive and enjoyable, and you're just like, oh boy, I need a break. But the kind of tired you're talking about is not a peaceful kind of tired. And that's not a good place to be. And sometimes we have to, I guess, find the thing that, you were talking about. Working out is important to you. Find the thing that for you brings you a sense of peace and joy and happiness. And it doesn't always have to include your dog. But sometimes you just need a little me time. And then you can go and bring it. It's just like, I guess it's a lot like being a parent. You can be a better parent if you have a little bit of time to kind of replenish your own inner resources, and then you can go back and you're ready to give more to your child or your family or your dog. So
absolutely. And I think it's important to not push through that, right? This is another thing I see is like, okay, I'm feeling a little bit drained or tired or frustrated, but I haven't done as much with my dog today as I normally do. And okay, we haven't done our trip to the park, or we haven't, and rather than go, hey, even sometimes honestly just acknowledging, okay, what do I need in this moment? Sitting down and taking a couple breaths and just like landing in this moment, looking around and go, okay, all right, I landed. I just like, it's literally can be a moment sometimes. And then you're like, okay, I've just acknowledged, okay, like what do I need in this moment? And then I can go and create some other possibility for another being, but without that, just pushing through and going, I'm not okay, but you're literally saying to yourself, your needs don't matter. You're not important. Just putting yourself on the back burner, and that builds up time. That builds up, and it can actually create resentment. Absolutely create resentment towards, your dog or whoever you're caring for, because it's the come from. It's not pure like I want to give to you because I care about you and I love you. It's I have to give to you because, and it's just like, it's not the same at all.
So yes, and everyone has needs, and it's important to meet those needs so that you can help your dog, help others, help your family. It's that it's making me think of that phrase, put your own oxygen mask on first, because otherwise you're not going to be any good to anybody else.
Absolutely.
if you don't
Yeah.
have that. So yeah, that's great advice. And I love I love the concepts that we emphasized during this conversation, and that's
Mhm.
resilience, um, no judgment on yourself or on anybody else, because that takes you away from where you want to go, and just meeting your own needs, acknowledging your feelings in the moment. I think that's really very powerful advice. To
Mhm.
don't fight it, and don't force yourself to push through it, but just acknowledge it. And I'll tell you what my go-to is, because I usually have like this downtime in the afternoon where I just need to do something, whether it's take a nap or whatever. But what I find a lot of times is just sitting down with a hot cup of tea,
Mhm. Yeah.
and just sipping that hot tea and
Mhm.
relaxing and breathing and so forth. And that's for me.
Mhm.
Might not work for somebody else, but
Yeah.
that's one of my favorite go to
Yeah.
in the afternoon. And then you're more productive. You
Oh,
know, get a
absolutely.
lot more accomplished if you just give yourself that little moment, that little break. Um,
Mhm.
and also remember that the dogs need that too.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
if you're doing something really active with your dog, I know some of the folks listening are probably, really active in competition sports, and I was there for a long time, so I know how intense that can get.
Mhm.
Um, but I think it's good advice to, even in those situations, to just stop, take a step back, relax, do something, calming, and build up your own sense of resilience. Because
Mhm.
the thing I think our reactive dogs really need is to understand that they can be resilient. They can, see something that startles or frightens them, and they can perceive it, process it, and then move on, kind of bounce back from it. They can do that. And it's a process teaching them to do that. But,
Mhm.
as you pointed out so well, is we have to do that for ourselves first.
Mhm.
We can't teach it if we don't do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, if
Yeah.
you're feeling overwhelmed or like you're just, it's everything is too much and everything is coming at you,
Yeah.
um, they'll reflect that kind of right back to you. And I think it's important to look at what pace is it, reasonable for you to go
Mhm.
at. Um, and I know my tendency to sometimes is to speed up or like go quickly. But a lot of times, it's about kind of slowing down. And I find it's so interesting. Like if you like take a step, pause, kind of wait for, you to land and look at those places where you tend to rush, and look at how your dog responds to that. Like I can, I so many times I can see, like if we're getting ready to go somewhere and I'm getting rushy or like oh thinking of like really in my head about all the things I've got to do, I can see, that tension being reflected in my whole family and everybody starting to rush in it, whether it's like going, okay, this is going to take what time it takes. If I just take pause every time I see everything kind of
Mhm.
snowballing, then the outcome and thinking about like, what is your intention? What do you want the outcome to be? And if you want it to be calm and relaxed, then creating that throughout
Mhm.
the time versus rushing it or pushing and then expecting it to all go well.
Yeah, and we're all impacted by the energy of the people around us, and it's the
Mm-hmm.
same. The dogs are impacted by our energy. So, like you said, it affects your whole family if you're having one of those, tension moments. And the same is true with the dog. So, if we can start with ourselves
Mm-hmm.
and practice calmness, mindfulness, resiliency, and and no judgment, all of those things, that's the beginning of helping our dogs.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I just love this whole concept of taking care of yourself, because I think we miss that. It's never really been a part of the whole dog training world,
Yeah.
uh, but it should have been. It should have been. We were kind of missing an important piece of the puzzle by not paying attention to that. So I think, your message is so valuable and so uplifting for people because, you're doing the right thing when you're caring for yourself. That's the right thing to do. You shouldn't feel guilty about doing something for yourself. So, Miranda, thank you so much for doing
Yeah,
this
absolutely.
today. And before we close, just want to remind everybody who's watching this today that you can see Miranda's interview today. And if you're watching this on the replay and you have a question that you want to ask Miranda, just go ahead and put it in the comments and tag her. And she'll see it. I'm sure she'll pop right in and answer your questions. So before we close, Miranda, is there any like parting words of wisdom that you want to leave for everybody?
Yeah, I mean, the last thing is just be, remembering that being kind to yourself. Like, if you can take a little bit of that love that your dog has for you, that unconditional love, that acceptance. I mean, why we all love dogs, and offer it to yourself as in the form of understanding, compassion, and acceptance. That will be greatly reflected back to you by your dog. Like, you can only meet them where they're at if you're willing to start to meet yourself and accept yourself and meet yourself where you're at. And it really takes so much of the struggle and stress and heartache out of a journey with a dog. I get that it's not always smooth sailing, but if you're able to be, start to learn to be kind to yourself through it, that can be the real gift. And then everything can open up and feel so much more possible.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful advice, to reflect back to yourself that unconditional love. We can take a lesson from our dogs in that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, so thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure.
This has been wonderful. And I so appreciate you joining us this morning. And again, just go ahead, put any questions you have in the comments and tag Miranda, and she'll be happy to answer you. So